Hello, welcome to Pod Songs with me, Jack Stafford, where I interview inspirational people in service to others as inspiration for a new song. Today, I'm speaking with a mountaineer and world record holder who's led expeditions to Everest, the North Pole and the South Pole. He's also a successful businessman who created the first commercial airline in Antarctica, as well as multiple multi-million-dollar businesses. If that wasn't enough, he also went on to launch a global youth empowerment project and produced a Primetime TV documentary about it. After journeying around the world, he's journeyed within and has had incredible spiritual experiences with enlightened masters. He taught meditation to monks in India and around the world. He lives in constant bliss, joy, love, and creativity. It sounds like I'm bigging him up too much, but this episode lives up to it. Please welcome Martyn Williams.
Yeah, you look like you're in a beautiful soundproof room.
I am in a closet that I have covered with foam expressly for this purpose.
Oh, well, your voice sounds great.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, well, the reason we're getting together is because I spoke to I saw your wife on this King Yoga chat, and she was in this live session. She was telling these incredible stories. So, and everyone else in the group wanted to hear more about it. But the session ended, and I was thinking, I really want to hear more about it. And having this podcast is like a superpower. It's like having a city. So anything I want to know about, I just can reach out to people and have conversations, learn more about it. And she said to me, I know somebody even more interesting than me, my husband, Martyn.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been in touch by email, and yeah, so it's an incredible story you have. So I can't wait to hear all about it, you know?
Okay, great. Well, where do you want to start? Do you have some questions you want to start with, or what's your thinking?
Well, I just put my podcasts into categories because I interview so many different people, but you're going to be quite difficult to put into a category because you've got this wild adventure side, and then this, shall we say, spiritual yoga service side. So maybe it's better to start with the adventure side because that's where is that more where your life started? Is that how you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's where it started, or I guess life as an adventure would be an overall theme, you know. So,
yeah, I got to write a song about this. So if we could have an overall theme, that would be great.
Okay, good. Yeah. Well, actually, life as an adventure is a great topic to me, you know.
Yeah. You've had some crazy adventures. But it's better to start. Just tell me whatever comes into your head.
Yeah. Okay. So then, I guess if you look at life from the perspective of an adventure, for some reason, I think curiosity has been a major driver for my whole life. And so if you look at the series of adventures that I went on, often it was about exploring what's possible next. So at an early age, I was born in Liverpool and started heading off into nature at an early age and started rock climbing at 14. And so I've often been propelled by, what does it look like around the corner? When the view from the top of the mountain reveals another mountain range? Oh, well, let's go over there.
You lost your accent on one of the climbs.
That's right. Well, actually, it's a bit of a story there. My first job, so I went to university in Wales, did lots of rock climbing there. Got a job as a teacher in the Yukon in a little village. 200 native people who lived on the land, who lived in log cabins. They hauled their own water. They cooked up wood stoves, no electricity in the building. So I'm in this little school there, and the kids come in the classroom. I'm teaching grades 1 to 6, and they don't understand me. And literally,
they thought you were one of the Beatles.
Yeah, but they didn't. Their realm was so small they didn't even know who the Beatles were.
Oh wow!
Their world was just this little village and nature and trapping and eating moose meat and stuff like that, right? So definitely had to shift there pretty rapidly. So from there, I'd already been rock climbing and exploring. I've been to South America, climbing, unclimbed peaks in South America, things like that. And so even as a teacher, I ended up so in that little village, I learned a whole pile of skills, from the native people. So I learned about, trapping and dog mushing and living and going out at -50. So even that, as a kid from Liverpool, the native people there, the kids are playing soccer at -40 in just running shoes, jean jackets, no mitts, no hats. They just adapted, right? And so that for me, that I got a whole look into another culture being there. People who were strongly connected with the land, had all these sorts of family taboos, just a whole way of looking at the world totally different to the way I'd grown up. And that gave me perspectives on, oh, wow, we each see the world through a very different lens.
That was your first job out of university?
Yeah.
Oh, that's not your typical career path, is it? You were
Right.
on, I want to have an adventure.
That's right. Yeah. And unfortunately, there was an anthropologist in that community. So he gave me insights into, for instance, so in the first few days, many of the girls would not even speak to me, right? And so he explained that for them, they'd been brought up where it was taboo for a young girl to speak with a male she did not know who was not a relative. And so literally I was breaking, the school system was breaking the societal structure by even being in the community, and so there's all these adjustments going on. So I guess that perspective of seeing the world through different eyes and then seeing possibility through different eyes has been a driver for me. So almost like a philosophical driver for me. But then also my just love of adventure, having taught in a little village, I then started being offered my adventure side, was offered various guiding in the Yukon, and then from there started various guiding businesses that led me, to guide and do adventures around the world, So it was always this, oh, well, here's a neat opportunity. Let's pursue this,
Yeah. Wow. Mr. Outdoors man, if you were a few years later, you'd have a TV series about you or something like that.
Yeah, probably, yes. Because I guess the beauty of it was, though, that at that particular time and place, it was very difficult to make a living. That would be, so it started in my community in 1969, so taught there for a couple of years, then started guiding in the early 1970s. So at that, in fact, it was the transformation from the outdoor world. If you look at the transformation in the outdoor world over those years, my first inspiration at, say, 16, I went to the Alps and saw mountain guides, and I said to my dad, I want to become a mountain guide. He said, well, it's impossible. You grow up in the family. At that point in time, guides were born into their fathers are mountain guides. It was just like carpenters and other professions passed on from father to son, right? Whereas now the whole situation has changed, and now anybody with a desire can pursue a career, those sorts of careers, right? So massive shifts in these big industries,
And see, I saw you climbed Everest, and what are the hardest climbs you've ever done?
So I guess climbs stick in our memories for various reasons, right? And so one of them that particularly stands out was a winter ascent, which is in the UK, the winters are pretty cold. So it was like -30, -40. We're climbing an unclimbed peak called Mount Ulu. And we got on the mountain, and a big storm came in, wrecked our tents. Our tents started to disintegrate. So we had to build an igloo. And there was 5 of us, so we built this, in the storm, we built this massive 5-person igloo, got inside, and then we made a bunch of errors. And so started heading, the classic, now in reflection, it's a classic Everest story. We hear all these stories about people, having problems on Everest late in the day. And ours was the same thing, but many years earlier, and we hadn't yet learned. So we ended up going for the summit and getting to the summit of this peak at like 5 o'clock. It was getting dark at 6. And so we turned around and coming down super steep slopes in the dark. At one point, we were roped up, and one of our team members, I was leading the way. One of the team members lost balance, zoomed off, hit me, knocked me over a cliff. We were on a rope though, so fortunately I just fell 15, 20 feet, hit the end of the rope, stopped, and was able to climb off the cliff. And then, so we got around that obstacle. And then when we finally got into the tent, it was now 24 hours since we'd started. We got into the tent like at 8 o'clock in the morning, just as it was getting light. And one of the team members pulled off his boots, and his feet were literally frozen solid. So then we had this whole thing of just what to do with his feet. And again, in the evolution of outdoors, we now know the best treatment for that. It's pretty standard practice, but at that point it wasn't. And so we were just, oh wow, here we are. Let's have some tea. Let's try and warm them up. And so I put them on my chest for a while. We put them on other people's chest to try and thaw them out. And then we were so exhausted we fell asleep. And when he woke up, he was in agony. And
what is the best practice to do?
It's called rapid rewarming. So ideally we would have warmed up water to hot skin temperature and then put his feet. We didn't have a bucket for his feet, obviously, but we could have warmed them up much faster than we did, and that possibly might have saved them. But with our slower rewarming, it ended up with him losing his toes.
Wow.
So that was one of the more epic climbs.
Yeah. Wow. There's so many stories. Doing it for guiding for so many years.
I'll just tell you one more. So my training, my sort of training thought goes to another story. And this was a peak in Indonesia. It's the highest peak in Australasia. So if you want to do the 7 summits, you go to this peak in Australasia, which is called Carsten's Pyramid. And it's in Indonesia. It's very remote. It's 17,000 feet. And it's the alpine area there is about 14,000. And then it's a 3,000-foot rock climb. So we went there with a group, and it was very difficult to get permission. And I think we were maybe the only party that year to get permission. And so we get to the base of the mountain, and a big snowstorm comes in. And it's actually normally a rock climb. And the weather there it's tropical. So the weather there is afternoon storm, morning clear, right? And so the whole idea is start early in the morning, climb as fast as you can, get to the summit, and then get down again in poor weather. But now we're at the base of the mountain, and it snows for 3 days. We're looking at 2 feet of snow in the tents and stuff like this, right? And so we go to the base of it's a 3,000-foot rock climb. So we go to the base of the rock and look and say it's impossible. There's no way we're going to do it. But then one of the group there was a doctor who had to get back to Germany to actually Switzerland to help his clients. And so he said, please, can we go and look? And so there were 2 of us who were leaders, myself and a buddy of mine, Pat Morrow. And we said, well, there's really no way, but for you, we'll go and look, right? And so we headed off there, and we started super early in the morning, and we got on the rock, and we're brushing the snow. It was snow all over the place. We're trying to find the holes, but we get up the first 100 feet, and then, oh wow, we've got up a little way. Let's go a bit further. So that day was this magical day of just, oh, we got a bit higher. Oh, we got a bit higher. Oh wow, look, we can get over there. Just this exploration as we get higher and higher till eventually by 1 o'clock, we actually did it. So in all my memories of expeditions, that one really stands out because it was just so improbable and so unexplored, and so, I guess, very much in the moment of exhilaration of just, oh wow, what's next?
So those 7 summits are the most famous ones in the world, or what?
They're the highest peaks on each continent.
Okay.
So we got 7 continents and 7 summits. So Everest would be one, and then Aconcagua in South America, McKinley in North America, Mont Blanc.
And you've done them all?
No, actually, I've done 3 or 4 of them. It's my pursuit of goals isn't always sort of logical. Many people set out to do the 7 summits, but it hasn't been a goal of mine. I've just done them accidentally through just sort of other things happening.
But it's incredibly dangerous. Is there ever a time you've had the experience and you say, listen, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be at home in bed?
Certainly there's times when we need to get out of here, whether it's avalanche conditions or bad weather, or there's a bunch of conditions where we say that. I'm just like, oh, let's turn around, or holy smoke, we pushed it too far, yeah.
Because
ideally we train though for the spots where we have options. So we often end up in those situations, but then often we've trained enough to know, okay, I do have 3 options here.
Because I remember you said in one video that in 1 year, 5 of your friends died, and they were super trained guides. They knew everything.
Mm-hmm. That's right, yes. And actually that did hit me. And so it really stopped and made me, rethink what I'm doing, Yeah. And it was definitely, I couldn't quite, as you described it, that was the case. These people were all top of the field and had been doing either guiding or leading for 20, 30 years. And all of a sudden, 5 of them each gone a bizarre accident, each one an unusual accident. So I guess the margins of error, or I guess when you're pushing the odds sort of roll against you sometimes.
Yeah. I saw it in the video where you talk about this pole to pole adventure where you got ordinary people or young people to do an adventure that you thought you realized had never been done.
Yeah, so that was a bit of a backstory to that one too. So having done these various expeditions, this ties into the more sort of spiritual aspect of things. I was then asking sort of, okay, well, what's next for me? I'm feeling really good about my life so far, and I've done all these expeditions. What's next? And so one night I had a dream, and I was on a train, and the train was being attacked by soldiers. And at first I felt fear, but then all of a sudden the fear subsided. Bizarrely, I stopped the train and got off and went to the soldiers and spoke to them and said, you don't have to be controlled this way. You can go home. It's almost like the classic guns to plowshares type concept. But it literally unfolded that way in this dream for me, right? And so, oh, wow, that's a pretty neat dream. So in the morning, I was explaining the dream, and all of a sudden this idea came up of, wow, a journey that had never been done before was from the North Pole to the South Pole into human power. So people had been to the North Pole. There's probably at that time, about 50, 60, 80 people had been to the North Pole. About 30 people, or 20 or 30 had been to the South Pole overland. But nobody had gone, from one to the other into human power, right? And so, but I realized, wow, I don't have to go to my explorer buddies to do this. Each journey and the journey in between could be done by anybody as long as they have a burning passion, right? And so my whole idea was, let me find young people around the world who have a burning passion for global issues, and let's do this journey, because we're coming up to a new millennium. And I was also interested in the whole idea of what does a millennium mean? What does it mean for humanity? And I realized that the South Pole is the first person in the world to enter the new millennium, because you're standing on the international dateline and the sun is above the horizon, right? And so you're the first people in the world to see the sun for a new millennium. So I thought, again, this is grandiose ideas. So how would it be if young people from around the world were all there, having journeyed and explored the potential, and along the way they gather promises of action for the new millennium from young people? So we're there, we greet the new millennium with ideally millions of promises of action for a brighter millennium, right? For a better millennium.
That's a big idea.
And so, yeah, big idea. So this idea came. So then I started, okay, well, let me plow at it, right? And so I raised some money. I started pulling a team together, and then the money dried up. I spent it all flying to meet potential sponsors and things like this. And so at one point, because I worked on it for about 2 years, at one point it looked like the whole project was dead. And I was, at that point in time, I was living in Santa Fe and moved my family to a small community in Canada where we could train the young people, like a cross-country ski community, basically, right? So I was in this little cross-country ski community in Canada, and I was in a men's group. And so I went to the men's group and said, look, they've been following my saga. We'd had GM on the line, General Motors for car sponsorship. We'd had Ford on the line. We'd had a bunch of big companies. And then they all came back to me and said, no. So I went to this men's group and said, look, the thing's dead. They said to me, well, how do you feel? I said, well, I feel sad. Well, just go for it. Feel sad. So I just rolled around on the floor for 2 minutes. And then I thought, well, I've just done the best I can, put everything into it. I've just exhausted all possibilities. I feel good about trying, right? So a day later, I get a phone call out of the blue from Korea, from a TV company saying, we'd like to sponsor your project. So they ended up sponsoring, so they ended up pulling the whole team together and finding these young people from 8 different countries. And
how did you find the young people?
So in Canada, what we did, we advertised, and we had 800 or so applications. And then I selected the best 20. We brought the best 20 together in this little community, little village, 100-mile house, and for 4 days, and said, okay, you're here to select one of you, and we're going to sort of run you ragged, exhaust you, drive you to the ground. And then you guys, because it was girls, it was a mixed team. It was 10 boys, 10 females. You get to select who you want to go, right? So I brought in a couple of my sort of really expert outdoor buddies who are super guides, et cetera, as to run this team. And so we, for 4 days, you had them up at 2:00 in the morning, tromping through swamps and just all these wild things. And it started off really competitive. And then over the 4 days, the team became more and more collaborative. So by the fourth day, when we said to them, okay, now you get to choose, about 4 of them immediately said, I see somebody better than me in this team, so I want to withdraw my name. I don't even want to be considered because I see other people here. And so I got together with the people organizing and said, okay, who do we think is going to win, right? And so we select a person who was on the Prime Ministers of Canada Advisory Board on the environment, had got a PhD, very competent young person. And then we put it to a vote amongst the rest of them and had a little, a process for voting. And the young people ended up selecting the one person who had not been to university, the person who had worked with actually Aboriginal native children and had been at the back of the line most of the time, looking after the people who were struggling. And so it was interesting. Their choice was so different. It was very much a heartfelt choice versus a logical choice. So given all our life experience in SMARTS, we'd chosen one person, and the young people, in fact, from my perspective, actually came up with a better choice.
And in the end,
this person was really heartfelt and considered.
And they were a great asset to the team for the whole trip, or?
That's right. Yeah, they became one of the leaders during the whole trip.
Wow. Yeah. And for the other countries, how did you select? So you had one person from each continent?
From Canada. So I looked for countries that had influence in the world, thinking, okay, this journey will probably be followed by the media. So how do we have media in big countries follow us? So Japan, Korea, Argentina, the UK, but the UK person unfortunately got injured just before the trip. South Africa. So the South Africa one was interesting in that we went to a group in South Africa to help us organize. And the person organizing was Black from South Africa. And so he called me up and said, we selected a candidate. And they told me, and they said, he's white. I said, what? we wanted a Black representative. And he said, well, South Africa is now, we just wanted to select the best person, and the best person happened to be white. So we're sending a white person. But it was difficult at times explaining when we're traveling through the States. People would say, well, how come the South African is white? So we'd have to explain the whole backstory, right, of how we ended up with a white South African.
And so did they have these camps in every country to this kind of SAS intensive training to choose the best person?
In some countries, yeah. In some countries, we just ran out of time and money. And so I just contacted Explorer friends and said, who have you got? Who fits this bill?
And then, I've seen the documentary, so I know, but how did the trip go?
Yeah, we had all sorts of wild adventures. And so I guess, for me, the things that stand out were one, how the team came together, blew up. The sort of the wildness of young people of that age and how they respond to different situations. And so I guess one of the summaries there would be that when the team blew up, often what brought them back together was understanding. Well, in fact, we had one session that was an amazing session where it took place in Santa Fe when the team was at a really low point. And so we gathered them up and said, okay, let's do an exercise where you get together with one of the other team members and run through what you like and what you don't like. So just start off with what you don't like. I don't like this about you. I don't like that about you. I don't like this about you. I don't like that about you. And just be candid, right? So brutal honesty. And then just start on the things. And everybody was very hesitant to do this, but they got into it. And what I saw happening is that the revealing of the things we don't like, they were all sort of little insubstantial things in the big context, which is, I don't like the way you you slurp your food, right? I don't like how you sort of push me over when we're playing around. What all these little things, right? But then it came to the likes were these big things. Yeah, I just love the way you show up in the world type things. So what I realized that over time, what comes to the forefront of our mind are all these little gritty things that are actually nonsensical that cause the dislikes, right? When we look through the lens of the likes, they just evaporate, right? And so it's almost like this is what we do as humans, right? In creating dislikes about people, we create all these small things that are actually very small, right? But when we actually list the likes overwhelm the smalls, you know? So after that, team performance shot up to a new level.
How long did the whole trip take?
It was 9 months.
Wow. And somebody got injured because you cycled. Somebody got hit.
That's right.
Somebody had an accident. Did they finish? Did all the people finish?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That was actually Dylan, the Canadian, who was the one chosen by the team that got knocked over by a truck.
And at the end, and two of them got pneumonia.
Yes, yeah. The list of sort of scrapes and injuries and bruises and bashes is pretty long. But overall, they all. When we got to the South Pole itself, it was a very obviously a massively exhilarating experience. Very, very powerful.
Because you cycled along with them the whole trip, yeah?
Yeah, I had to fundraise intermittently, so I would go so at times I left them. That's when they they chose leaders, and I tried various ways of leadership. I said, okay, let's try one a day, and so I asked them, what leadership style do you want? So they said, well, we all want to be leaders, so let's try one a day. But one a day turned out to be pretty chaotic because some had a leaning towards authoritarianism. So in their one day, they became super authoritarian. Others became just you choose type approach. And so it was wildly chaotic, the one. So then we switched to one a week, and then they ended up choosing one person, which is, again, the Canadian for most of the rest of the journey.
Yeah, because as you said through the documentary, the weaker members ended up helping the strongest members, or they're carrying all their stuff for them, and it's pretty emotional, yeah.
That's right, yes. Yeah, again, the whole idea that we think, our sort of position in society or position in the world is static, but it's constantly changing because we're less effective. And in a team, then as people become less effective, others need to step in. And so it became very obvious that dynamic in these wild situations. It becomes very obvious that we have to utilize that dynamic. We have to step in, to take over when others become weaker,
And is there a longer documentary about it, or only that short one that I saw?
No, there's actually a 2-hour documentary that was filmed by a Korean TV company. It was played on national TV in Japan and Korea, on Primetime, actually. So it reached a lot of people.
Is it on YouTube as well?
It is. I haven't made it public, so maybe your impetus, I'll make it public. I'll put it on.
Do you keep in touch with all the young adults who are obviously grown up a bit now?
Yeah. So actually, we've been, because it's 20 years this year, so we've been chatting quite regularly on Facebook about meeting and just what we've been up to. So we've been having group calls to just share where everybody's at and what they've been up to. And
where are they now? How did that must have, what an event in their lives. They've gone on to greater things.
Yeah, they've all, it's really interesting where they went. One person, Renaud from France, went off and worked for the United Nations on a global charter, and then got involved in environmental economics. Dylan, the Canadian who hadn't finished grade 12, got into a master's program because of his life experience. And so then he's gone off and worked doing environmental work in Northern Canada. Jessica's now a pediatrician. And so those are involved in environmental education or humanitarian education. Yeah.
And how many promises for change did you receive at the end of the trip?
So what happened there, we would go into schools. We had a team back in Canada who were prepping the journey for us. So we'd go into schools along the way and speak to them, and then literally ask them to write out promises, right? And so it's funny, some of the promises so I guess a promise can have an emotional element and can have substance, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the promises that stands out of millions or thousands of promises we we collected was in a kindergarten in Vancouver, a kid who was struggling with school, et cetera, said to the teacher, "I want to be kinder to my mum." And the teacher knew the circumstance of the child and how difficult the child was, and came to us with tears in her eyes saying, "Look, I've just received this promise," right? And so meanwhile, other ones were, I'm going to volunteer at the local hospital or for the environmental organization. But it's funny that some really touched us hearts because of this, the backstory, I guess, to what was involved. So we ended up collecting many thousands, and then the United Nations, we connected with an environmental project in there. And so we ended up getting 60-something million added to our group from the United Nations. So the United Nations sent us saying, take these with you as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just while we were trekking to the South Pole.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
9 months to do that is when you're stopping in schools as well and doing it overland. It's through all that terrain, through Central America, down through South America. I mean, that is a long way. Tough.
Yes, it was. What we'd do, we had ideas where we would get to, but we never knew. So often we ended up, because of time, we'd often ended up camping by stopping by the side of the road, sleeping, basically we had tents, but often we wouldn't even use the tent. We'd just find somewhere we could just crash out on the ground. Or
wow, that's a hardcore trip.
And off first thing in the morning, just up and off and get going.
Oh,
yeah.
I've done cycle touring too, but I can't do that. I need a shower because you're so sweaty down there, and it's just that I know people that do it, but I couldn't. Yeah, just that. That's a tough trip. Respect to those people that did that.
Yeah, I was just they did really well. Yeah. They really, and so often it was what I mentioned. We did this brutal honesty session, but then also it was the reminder why we're doing the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kept people going, is just the why, the big why. Why are we doing this? We're doing this to share potential with other people.
What was that? Was that the slogan of the whole trip then? Share the potential?
Actually, the slogan was more about small steps make a difference. Each small step does make a difference to help the world become a better place.
Okay. Well, we could stop the interview there and it would still have been great, but I want to get into the other thing that originally got me to talk to you. Your work with Nithander, is that right?
And yes.
So how did that, tell me all about that. How did that come about?
Okay, so having done these expeditions, I was then looking, okay, well, what's next? And I was running an adventure company. We were, flying into Antarctica. So we employed 35 people, and I was in a really good place in life asking what's next. And I went to a meeting. I was off to a meeting, and I was staying with a friend at the time, and they said, I have some information to share with you about the meeting you're going to. I said, okay. So this person described to me the 3 people I was meeting with in a way that I'd never heard them described. And I said, well, that's amazing. How did you find that? And she said, well, I'm taking this course in psychic abilities, and that just came to me. I thought, oh, wow, it's pretty weird, so I'm interested. So I said, okay, I want to check this out. Just using my logic, I want to find out. So line me up with 5 people you think are pretty good at this. Over the next 5 days, I'll go and see them all, right? So I went to see all these psychics and mystics and whatever. And each one of them gave me some insight, and each one of them was correct to some degree. So I said, wow, this is an interesting thing. Let me explore more. So that was my start onto this sort of what is spirituality, or what are these other realms? And so having started that, when it came across Nithander, he was saying, there was a website I went to, and he said, I'm not here to prove I am God. I'm here to prove you are God. Oh, wow, that's a pretty bold statement. So let me check him out. And he was coming to Seattle. So I was in Vancouver, drove down to Seattle, went into this weekend course with him. And he started doing meditations. And in the meditations, or in fact, more after the meditations, all of a sudden, my awareness moved to a whole new level. So in one example is that he did one meditation. He said, now go and have some food. And as I sat down to eat this food, which is rice and something or other, each grain of rice, I got a whole dimensionality to it, a whole experience of just, being super present, right, with this rice. I'm like, wow, I've never had this level awareness of eating, right? Of just being present with a grain of rice. So he was explaining in this weekend that our human potential is to live in even more joy, and he described it as bliss, right? And so I said, well, it's pretty neat. I'm very interested. So on the Sunday night, the energy, his presence was emitting, from my perspective, so much energy that people were just in an ecstatic state. And so the course was, 2 18-hour days. And so Sunday night at 4:00 in the morning, everybody was just dancing away. Nobody was tired. It was like, this is a whole new experience for me in terms of human performance. And so the next morning he said, okay, I'm going to initiate you into a healing practice. And so come and meet me. So I went to meet him and he said, okay, I'm going to open an energy center in your body that over the next hours will cause you to fall into bliss, into joy. And I said, well, sounds great to me. So let's go. So I got this initiation, and then I was driving back to Vancouver, left the room, was walking back to my car, and all of a sudden these overwhelming feelings of joy came up, and I started to laugh, fell to the ground, literally fell on the ground laughing, right? And then
so this is a weird experience. Before this, you were not into psychics or anything. You were were you a skeptical person, or how would you?
Yeah, so I guess I'd rejected Christianity in school in England, right? And so I looked at life through the perspective of geological time. We're a grain of sand in geological time, and so what I do really doesn't have any effect on anything. And so let me just have an effect on me, which is just live my life from curiosity and enjoy life, So, but then in this process, as soon as I started to discover about psychics, then other worlds, I saw Christianity through a different lens. I saw all religions through a different lens once I started down this path. So I saw that we have the societal conditioning, or I guess I'd responded to the societal conditioning that often comes with religions. You must do this, you must eat. When I was in school, Catholics ate fish on Fridays, and it seemed like, what's all that about? And so part of my rebellion was just against rules
and the leadership. Yeah.
But then as I started to delve deeper, I realized that these were traditions that transcended rules, or that all these traditions transcend logic in many ways. Yeah.
So what happened when you were driving back to Vancouver?
So driving back to Vancouver, it's a big freeway, I-5, and every 15 minutes or so, these giggles would arise in me. I have to pull off the road and stop and laugh for a few minutes, and then get back on the road.
It's dangerous.
Yeah. It's basically, it's now sort of, my life is that way. I see life through the lens of humor and laughter and love,
So it didn't wear off?
No, it didn't. No, from my perspective, it's in everybody, right? So we all have the space we can reside in, but I see that our access to it is limited by various factors in life. How we were brought up, what life experiences we have, how we view the world often connects us from that space, right? And so having had that experience, it took me probably a year or two before I realized, oh, wow, this is actually there all the time, and I'm just not connecting with it all the time.
Yeah, I guess after an experience like that, that's enough to convince anyone, isn't it? So what happened next then?
Yeah. So again, we're getting into pretty mystical stuff here. I hope you're okay with that. Yeah. Okay. So during that course, I had the idea, wow, this guy is amazing. How about would he be interested in coming to Vancouver, right? Because I have a bunch of buddies and they would be interested. And so on the next break, somebody said, would you consider going to other place in the world? And he said, yeah, Vancouver. Who is here from Vancouver? And so he named Vancouver. And so I put up my hand and he looked right at me, and the two people from Vancouver sitting right next to me said, okay, I'll come to Vancouver. So I had the thought, and then this happened, right? So I arranged for him to come to Vancouver and do a course. And again, I saw the same phenomenon of just people over the weekend of intense meditations, really, really getting big realizations, right? And so then I went off to India, and in India, So how to describe this? It's a bit hard. I don't know. There's so many stories flowing, bubbling up. I don't know how to do.
When I
So in
researched him, there
India,
was some controversy. He's as controversial. Because how old is he? How
that's right.
old
Yeah.
was he when he came to you,
Now
when you met him?
he was 27
As
when
a
I met
young
him.
man, yeah.
Right?
In
Yeah,
this
yeah.
time.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Yes. And so I was amazed that this young man could have so much intelligence, intensity, and space. I really see it now as a space to influence other people. So maybe that's where I'll take it up for just 1 second in terms of this whole idea of space. We did a bunch of research with him, and so we used brain researchers came in and did work with him and that sort of stuff. And so what we discovered was that he had the ability to utilize certain parts of his brain at will. And so in the researchers were touching his skull various places, and he would say, okay, I can activate that bit, I can activate this, things like that. And then we also wired up people who are remote, so we wired up people who were in San Jose, and he was in India. And he came on a two-way, just like we're doing now. He came on two-way and said, okay, now I'm sending you energy, I'm blessing you. And their brain waves went from alpha to delta, which is typically associated with deep sleep, but they were wide awake. And so it really is, we demonstrate not just his ability, but the ability to transmit synchronous brain waves over huge distances.
So you're all in by this stage. I'm assuming you're.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. I'm now also saying, oh wow, this is amazing.
So you're starting to devote a lot of energy and time to developing this.
That's right. Yeah. So I eventually became an ashram. I was staying in the ashram for about in and out for about 7 or 8 years.
In India.
In India. That's right. Yeah. And then he would send me other places around the world to teach meditation and then come back. Things like that.
So you gave up your business, or you got someone else to run it, and you do this full time?
Yes. I just gave up and became full time. Right?
Okay. Wow. Yeah. After an experience like that, because nothing in a book or anything can convince anyone. Only what you see, what you hear with your own eyes, really. So
that's right, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So what kind of experiences did you have in these 7 years? Your wife in the video chat said he was giving darshan to people, which like giving them an energy. How does that work?
Yeah. So what he describes himself and said other saints, they're basically a conduit for divine energy, cosmic energy, whatever you want to call it. There's a bunch of names you can use. And so then that energy is transferred just by being in the presence or through touching. So one of the things that I saw time and again was that people would, have a whole long list of questions for him about life. Should I get married? Should I get this job? 20 questions about life. And then they'd go into his presence and go toward and just come close to him. And he'd say, what do you want to, what's your question? And they'd go blank. Literally. So these enlightened masters or beings are emitting an energy that is so calming that it literally calms our nervous system down, so that things that are meaningful in the moment all of a sudden become meaningless. So all of life's travails and difficulties can fade away. Literally, that's literally what I saw. But then he also said, he was saying that he was saying to us, around me, things happen that I don't have any conscious knowledge of. He said, so energy is expressed through me. So one day a group of us was sitting by a pool on some granite steps, and he was sitting out on the water on a little platform, and he was speaking, and he'd been saying to us, I feel like an energy moving through me is going to awaken people's kundalini or get people moving. So he was talking and just did a hand gesture, just rolling his hand. And all of a sudden, one of the people he was looking at all of a sudden started to bounce up and down. And then they fell headfirst in the water. Right? And then he looked at his hand, looked at the next person, and then did the same hand gesture. And they bobbed up and down and fell in the water, right? So there's 20 of us sitting on this row, and he just went down the row, looking at people, moving his hand, right? And so then we went and did some research. We went online, and it turns out that.
But let's just picture this, because this is a movie scene, though. So there's people bounce up and down, they fall in the water, one by one. Yeah. You were one of these people. You fell in. And,
No, actually, I'm standing to the side observing this. Right?
and what did they feel afterwards?
But I've had my
Did they have an enlightenment after? Was their consciousness raised forever after this?
no, they were so what he said though, he said, okay, I can see this energy moving through me that wants to be transferred to other people. So we went online and realized there's a concept called yogic flying, which if you Google it, you'll find other enlightened masters have had similar experiences of transferring energy through this. And so then there was a whole period where people who came into his presence would automatically start to jump up and down, and vibrate and literally bounce around, and it became so wild that in some meditations we would have to, the group who were helping organize, we'd get mattresses and put 6 mattresses around somebody who would be bouncing up and down so they wouldn't get hurt. And it was really, and so in the brain research, though, the researchers said, okay, these people who are bouncing, they're going into delta, but also people who are not bouncing are also going into delta too. So it's like his presence was shifting everybody into a different frequency. And for some people, it would stay longer, and other people it would diminish. And the same with healing too. We saw that, for instance, many people would come to him for healing, and some would be healed, some would not. But over a 10-day period, say in a 20-day course, often on day 10 of a course, he would say, who here has an allergy? And so a bunch of people, typically in a group of a few hundred people, it'd be 10 people. He'd say, okay, what's your allergy? Peanuts, milk. Go to the kitchen and get that object and come. So they go to the kitchen, come back, and he'd bless them and say, okay, now take the peanuts, take the milk. And out of 10, typically everybody would be allergy free, right? But then on return to life, sometimes that allergy was gone permanently. Other times it would reoccur, And so what I see there is that we all have the ability to free ourselves of various chains or shackles, whatever you call them. We also have the ability to create them, to step back into them. And the mind has that ability to find fault, to grasp onto things that cause us to re-engage in life as it was.
Okay, yeah, he sounds like a power station, just emitting tons of prana. But from what I've read from other masters is that they have to learn to control this. They shouldn't be like Dr. King, for example. They should be able to just have power of this as will. Did Nithyananda not have this ability to control it at all times?
So how he would describe it, because I read, for instance, what Dr. King would say and what other masters have said about this. So from Nityananda's perspective, this isn't just an energy that expresses, right? It's almost like a natural state. And so we don't have to, these powers we can seek, and we can do yogic practices to get them, or they can occur spontaneously, naturally. And so, if it's our natural state, then it's just our natural state, And so for him, he's saying, look, it's our natural state. So let's just enjoy our natural state. That's how he would.
And did he? So he had a spontaneous awakening, or he did yogic practices as a young man in this life?
So again, he grew up in a small sacred town in India, where there's lots of masters. And so he described in his childhood about 10 different masters in the town, male and female, who had various abilities or had various ways of helping people. So there was a yoga master, for instance, who was in his early hundreds, who had the ability, and other people because I've been to that town and checked with other people, had the ability to help young people levitate, right? And so they would practice levitation. And so I guess to answer the question about, is it a skill or is it a space? It seems like it's, in order to fall into the space, you need to practice moving into a mindless state, right? And so, yeah, does that answer the question? So clarify that.
I guess this is a long conversation, but I know some masters, they have to put their hand over their solar plexus chakras to stop energy being emitted, and the higher you go, you can hurt people lower than you with just too much energy. So it's definitely something you have to learn to control, I think.
And or learn to utilize to good effect, I guess, really is my interpretation of what that would be. So, yeah.
So continue with so after 7 years of having a pretty mind-blowing experiences, what happened next?
So, what happened next is that I was traveling around the world, teaching meditations. And so in Los Angeles, I taught a group of students here. And so now one of the students, Maria, my wife, is now a teacher and is teaching the meditation group. So when it came to Vancouver, when it came to Los Angeles, I would come in to her group and meditate with the group. And so, but every time I was in her presence, my consciousness would raise. I could feel a shift in my consciousness. Again, this may sound a bit bizarre, but I would go into the temple and there's various deities in the temple, Krishna and Rama and Ganesh. And so when I'd go into the temple, these deities, I could actually have conversations with them. And then at other times I couldn't, right? And so when I came into the presence of Maria, all of a sudden I would have this increased awareness, increased consciousness. And so one day we decided to go for a walk and we went off hiking in the mountains. Within half an hour, all of a sudden we both had this experience of, wow, we are meant to be together. And so basically in a half-hour walk in the hills, it became clear to both of us that we were meant to be together. And so then it was a case of, okay, now this is my new direction, right? And so away I go.
Love to a new level. Okay, so you decided to come to Los Angeles, or was she a disciple of?
Yeah, she was. Yes, okay. Yeah. So I was in Los Angeles. So Maria works here as a concert pianist and as a musician. So then it was okay. Well, so this is my new path. Basically I have nothing, and so let me just start all over again.
You've had some life, Martyn, I tell you. Okay, keep going. You're on a roll now.
Oh, okay. So then it was, okay, so what's next? And so at that point I thought, I had been doing coaching and doing obviously guiding and doing public speaking around adventure and human performance. And so then it was back into the realm of what is optimal human performance. And so taking all my experience with the adventure side of life and seeking human performance there, with now all this information from and experience with I call them Swamiji, about what our human potential is, I'm blending them together. So now that's what I'm doing now. I coach a few different individuals and companies on what is human performance, what is ultimate human performance.
Okay. Are you still involved with Nithya?
I am, yes, yeah. And so I still go to the temple and do some of the rituals. So, again, this bizarre connection with deities still exists for me, it feels bizarre, but still, it's just a calling. I can't explain it logically, but there's a calling. And just for a few minutes on that, for some reason, Swamiji asked me to move a lot of the deities and install a lot of the deities. And this is where I saw, this is more than, again, we're back into the mystical realm of what happens. So one of my first experiences was we were asked to pick up a Ganesh from a warehouse, and it was the Ganesh weighed 4,500 pounds, was in a huge crate. And so a forklift driver picked it up, brought it over to the truck. There was two of us there, and Swamiji was there. And he started to put it in the truck, but it wouldn't fit. I was in the truck and I could see that the crate was 4 inches too big, right? And so we put it down on the ground and shouted, Swamiji, Ganesh is too big to go in the truck. And he said, no, he isn't. So he came back around and he said, okay, try again. And the forklift driver says, well, we just tried, it didn't fit. He said, no, try again. So the forklift driver, okay, I'll show you, type thing. Up comes the forklift and Swamiji goes in Ganesh, and it fits perfectly. So within one movement of his hand, the Ganesh fitted in the truck. And so after that, I saw similar things many, many times. Probably, 200 times I saw similar things. Another time, we were moving another Ganesh, which was made out of metal, quite heavy. 5 guys trying to lift it, and we couldn't quite lift it. It was awkward to get 5 people around this thing, right? And so we said, let's get 2 poles and we'll rig up a system so we can hold it further away and lift it, because we had to put it on the table. So the guys went to get some poles, and I was there. Swamiji walked in the room and said, oh, let's move Ganesh. I said, well, I've just sent the guys to get poles so we can move it. He said, no. These ladies here will do. So there were 3 ladies who were polishing another deity. And he said, come on over. So they sort of, all sort of flustered. He said, come on over here. And so they came over. So now it's three ladies, myself. And he comes over and says, okay, puts his hand, okay, lift. So we all lift. It's super heavy. And up comes the deity and on the table. And so he says, okay. So he's walking away, and the 4 guys come back, and they look and see the deity on the table. I just sort of point at Swamiji and saying, as he's casually walking away,
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw this ability to manipulate matter, manipulate all sorts of things time and again.
Yeah. I guess
another example would...
Please go on. Yeah, no, this is...
I'm on a bit of a roll here. So another example was that we were in the Himalayas going to Mount Kailash, and 60 people traveling by Toyota Land Cruiser overland to Mount Kailash. We come over a pass, and the drivers say, Mount Kailash is visible from this pass. It's about 20 miles away, but there's cloud. We can't see it because it's in the cloud. So we stop all the vehicles, and Mount Kailash is very sacred in the Hindu tradition. And so Swamiji says, okay, I'll get the clouds to move. And so he then invokes Shiva, and says, Shiva, please make Kailash appears to us. And then says to us, okay, it'll appear in about 15 minutes. We're at about 16,000 feet, and I think the peak is like 22. So about a 4,000, 6,000 foot difference, and there's clouds all around us, right? And the cloud ceiling is 1,000 feet, and I'm a mountaineer, and I know these things, weather, right? And there's no way this is going to change that rapidly. But then 15 minutes, we start seeing a break just over where the Tibetan guides say Mount Kailash is. 18 minutes, the peak starts to appear. 20 minutes, and the peak is totally clear. And then we went back the same thing the next year, went back again, same thing, same place, the weather's bad. And again, he says, okay, I'll call and ask for us to see Mount Kailash. So anyway, I have a whole litany of these sort of wild.
So he had, from my research, he had some controversy in India. There was some allegations. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so I was there when the whole controversy broke, and so he was accused of rape, right? And he was accused of rape, and there was a video released by a big TV company of him clothed but in bed with a very famous film star, right? Female film star. She's a devotee of his, right? And so I knew her. She would come regularly to the ashram, and she was making videos on yoga and this sort of stuff, right? She was really close to the senior group who were running everything. So when this controversy broke, he was accused of rape, but nobody was named in the rape, right? And so, but the inference was that he had raped her, right? But the video didn't show that. The video showed them lying clothed on the bed. And so it seems like what had happened is that his popularity was increasing. And this is my version of the story, right? So we all have different versions of things. So in South India, the government in control is an atheist government. At that time was an atheist government. And they saw his rise in popularity because 10,000 people would come out to an event he was running, right? So he would fill football stadiums with crowds of people wanting to hear him speak. And so from my perspective, this was an attempt to discredit him, basically. Mm. And so the video was produced, this rape charge went out, there was nobody named in the rape charge, but then, so he went into hiding. And for us, the Westerners who were there at the time, it appeared, the whole thing appeared almost funny. It was just, this is nonsensical. We didn't quite understand it. The videos didn't make sense. Nothing made sense, but the media blew it up, and literally people came to the ashram and were very, very angry about his breaking of these traditional rules. But also what we saw we saw that there was a media manipulation going on. So, for instance, there was the morning of the event, all of a sudden we saw smoke coming out of one of the buildings. And so we went over there, and it was a thatched roof, and Molotov cocktails had been thrown over the wall of the fence onto the building. The building was in fire. And we knew the building just had a few papers in and of no use. But then 3 hours later, photographs of the building go on the media saying records are being burnt and hidden because of the scandal. They're now hiding the records, right? So we knew that there was a media manipulation going on. For instance, that same day, hundreds of videos of this appeared on YouTube, and we checked on how that had happened. And it seems like it would take a whole crew of people working, uploading videos to multiple new channels, to get that sort of extensive coverage. So there was a mastermind behind it. And whether that was malicious, you can look at this was malicious or this was just, there was truth to the whole story. But from my perspective, it was all malicious.
Was there any sexual aspects to the ashram? Because I know Osho is very famous in the West for his, I've seen that Netflix documentary, which was also pretty disturbing. Was there anything like that in the ashram?
No, there was, again, he was highly experimental, right? So Times often say things like, for the next few weeks, I want the women not to speak to men. He was quite rigid in the division of males to females and how we related with each other, So he was very traditional in that respect,
Okay.
Yeah. So he had, he referred to Osho and spoke highly of Osho, and recommended we read many of his books, but said in the tradition, we view things like that differently. Traditionally, we have our roles. We have different roles in society. The males and females have different roles in society.
Was Osho an enlightened master, or do you ever know that?
From my perspective, having studied, I would call him an enlightened master, yes.
Because I saw him in that Netflix documentary, and he didn't seem like a very nice guy, some of the things he said.
So I think with whether it's Zen masters or any master, often they can be harsh, So I've seen Nityananda be very harsh to people. And often what he says, he's saying, nobody else will tell you the truth. Everybody else is goody-goody around you. And I'm the only one who can I'm the only one who can help wake you up to reveal what's ultimately important to you.
Okay.
So, but I've seen him be very harsh with people.
I guess,
and if you look at the Zen approach, can be very harsh too, right?
I guess Dr. King said that he met many enlightened masters, but he yet to meet a saint. Still people, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
And so now Nityananda he left India and he lives off the coast on an island. Is it Madagascar? Where is it?
Off Australia.
Oh, it's off Australia.
Yeah.
And have you
so
been
again, there? No, I haven't, no. So the controversy there is that literally he ended up leaving the country because of attempts on his life. He said this because at the ashram, I was there one time when the gates were stormed by villagers who had been riled up by the media, and literally people were climbing over the gates with big sticks and literally beating ashramites,
I guess it's more of a danger for them than for him. I guess for the safety of the ashram, he probably had to disband it. No,
that's right. Yes, that's right. Yeah,
and he's still a young man though. I mean, how old is he now?
So he's now 40.
40, young.
Yes, yeah.
And what is he's trying to start a new nation, is that right?
Yeah, so what's happening there is that he's saying that as Hinduism, and so from his perspective, Hinduism has its roots way back in ancient scriptures. And so there's been a transmission of these ancient scriptures down through the ages from 5,000 years, even longer, into modern day Hinduism. And you have all these scriptures, but then you have Hinduism interfacing with society. And as in traditional villages, there would have been a master in each village. You could call it a sage or a wise person in each village who would arrange marriages, help educate, all these sorts of things.
Brahmin.
And then when the British came in, they introduced another form of education, which is much more intellectual. And so he's saying that these traditional ways of learning, which were learning through transmission of energy, are ultimately where we need to go as for humanity. Humanity needs to go that direct. And so as Hinduism, moves more and more into the realm of logic, and gods are real for some people, mythological for others. So the teachings of Krishna are real for some people, mythological, or just outrageous for other people, right? So you have this realm of understanding or connection, right? And so he's saying that in order to get back to being in the flow of these are real, this energy is real, our abilities to move things, to understand, to connect with nature, we need to form a nation that exemplifies this.
And so he's doing that on an island now.
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever wonder if you got his powers and you could decide what to do with your mission in this life? It would be a big, difficult thing to know what to do, wouldn't it?
It would, yes. As I've explored for myself what is human potential and how do we alter the world? Because obviously pole to pole was the same thing, right? How do I, with my gifts, how do I contribute to the future of humanity? And I've been the president of environmental organizations. I've done all sorts of things like that. And where I look, from my perspective, our future, the heartfelt connection is an imperative almost. A heartfelt connection with nature, a heartfelt connection with other people. And the divine, or my version of the divine, falls in tune with that. When we are heartfelt, then we are connected with everything. So whether you call it oneness, or so from my practical perspective, often it boils down to just a feeling of heartfelt connection with everything.
But the more the more power you have, the more your responsibility. People at our level, kind of, or maybe you are knocking around here, we have these small impacts we can do. But for someone who's reached that level, that's a lot more responsibility, no?
Yes, yeah, massive responsibility. And he says, I spend every waking moment pursuing that, So I know as he has pursued it, I've looked, well, why would you go that way? Why not go this way? Using my own logic, right? But again, and so I keep falling into the trap of using my own logic to try to figure out something that's illogical.
He has a better view up there. So
that's right. Yes, that's what I keep seeing, is that I still keep falling for my own logic.
So can people go to visit him? Is he welcoming visitors? Or?
Not yet. No, he's saying that I'm still building the structure to welcome people, because again, the threats to his life are being real, and so he's still building that.
And how do you think the Australian government's gonna? I've seen the Netflix series what Oshu tried to do, and it went really bad. I don't know if you've seen the documentary, but they became heavily armed. They poisoned the neighbors. They were not nice.
That's right.
They were not nice people. So it's not going to take much for any government to want to take him down. You know what I mean?
Yes, and what from the space of sort of empty and meaningless, all sorts of distortions can happen. So that's my perspective on the whole Osho thing, is that some of the devotees, it became okay for them to do these things, because from a space of oneness, these possibilities exist. But we have to, so Swamiji's spoken about this too, and saying, we have to be super cautious and super vigilant to not divert from the path of what is good for all. So he's very much aware of that, and very much aware of the Osho phenomenon and so even within the organization, what will happen is that somebody will become a teacher or an acharya, and then start their own little group, and then and then ego will come in, and all of a sudden that person will start feeling more power, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I've seen this happen probably 30 or 40 times even within the Nityananda organization, right?
Closer to the group, get more power.
Yes, and then go off and start your own thing, or think you can do it on your own, or whatever. So sometimes within the organization, sometimes outside the organization. And I've seen him regularly say to people, actually, it's time for you to stop teaching for a while, go to this remote location in India for 6 months and practice the specific practice. So I've seen him pull people out of senior roles and be sent off to really just recalibrate almost.
What a shit job to be a master and have to deal with ordinary people, though. That would be such a pisser.
Actually, he does describe it. He does describe it. He says, in speaking colloquially with his senior disciples, he describes us as you idiots, It
would be like being in charge of a kindergarten teacher but 10 times worse.
So one little story there is that the ashram has now got, or had at that point in time, children who their parents were devotees, so he started a whole school, right? And so at one point, he said to all of us, and I was one of the senior people at this time, I want you to match up with one of the children, and you have to report to them every day. Tell them what you're doing and why. And so he said, because they will give you wisdom. So I was chatting with one of the most senior people who came to me and said, my little Gurukul student just tore a strip off me and gave me total insights. And this guy has got quite an ego. And he'd gone to this 10-year-old, and the 10-year-old had said, look, you're functioning from ego on this thing. Because I think what he said, it's how do you make decisions? That's the 10-year-old asked, how do you make decisions? And he said, well, I listen to the group and then I decide. And so the 10-year-old said, oh, so your ego runs the show.
Oh my God.
So that's the topsy-turvy nature of being around these enlightened masters. You can look at that through any number of lenses, right? And say, well, who would want to do that? But from the perspective of that senior disciple in that moment, that was earth shifting for them, because they had their pattern, right? They were smart. They just ran things that way.
As if this conversation couldn't get any weirder, I want to ask you about the Aetherius Society and how you came into that. Because we're in the same spiritual organization.
So what happened there is that Swamiji had been speaking about blessing the world. And so he said that he was saying, one of the spiritual practices to do is every moment just be blessing everything. So just make that as a spiritual practice. And so he said, start with 1 hour, start with 2 hours. So I started doing that.
Is that with gratitude or saying a prayer, or how does that go?
Just radiating blessings so literally just think I'm blessing the world almost. There's a very
or concentrate on individual things like now this glass, now this microphone.
No, everything actually. Just you can do it individually or collectively. So literally I'm blessing the world, right? And so he spoke about, then you can do it individually. So you're driving, bless the cars around you, et cetera, right? And so I started doing that more and more, and that really resonated with me. And so even in the pursuit of what is my best contribution to the world, having been the president of environmental societies, I know I can write letters, I can fight, I can do all these sorts of things. But for me, what resonates most profoundly in my inner space is just this aspect of just blessing the world, So really, that feels like what my calling is fundamentally, And then from that space, things happen, actions happen, right? And so when it came across the Aetherius Society, it was actually my wife Maria who really caught on to the organization at first, and so I would listen to Dr. King and look at his teachings, see how they fitted in with what I discovered in Swamiji's world. And so I saw that the aspect of blessing the world that the Aetherius Society is one of the foundational aspects of the Aetherius Society. It's a bit different in that it's done with almost, I would call it like a yogic or with a chi. If you take all the martial arts and combine elements of them, the Aetherius Society is using elements of those martial arts to radiate, right? And so it's, having even say with Swamiji, we would get videos of Qigong masters who are able to direct energy and manipulate people's bodies, manipulate movement and things like that. And we saw the correlation between Swamiji, just this energy flowing through him, other people playing with this energy and directing it. And then in the Ethereal Society, I saw the whole there was the society was doing something very similar of gathering energy and sending it out in a very systematic way, and in a way that expanded potential. Because at the end of these 12 blessings, it's about, again, it ends up being, from my perspective, being back to blessing everything, back to, so we start off being very specific and end up being blessing everything. And every time, especially getting to that last blessing, I would feel the same Kundalini awakening, the same movements, same experience in my inner space that I would have in connecting with Swamiji, say, for instance. So I see the space of oneness. We can get there a bunch of ways. There's a correlation. There's an interface between these ways of getting there.
And also the operations with putting the energy into the batteries, into these batteries filled with crystals, and discharge, and sending them out, discharging them in psychic centers of the earth, or radiating them out to specific crisis points.
That's right. Yes. I see that there's a whole realm of possibilities and actions that most people are not really aware of or in tune with, that beings with a high level of consciousness can see, can observe, and for them it's systems, and for them it's structures, and so they're imparting to us, here's some possibilities, here's some ways of helping the world, Yeah.
Because we always think we're ingrained in the practical material mindset that if I'm going to help the world, I need to do it with my time or my money or something. But a yogi can stop a huge tornado or a hurricane, massive hurricane, by calling in the diva, giving them the energy they need, just transfer of energy. And then you try and stop a hurricane with anything material, just as an example. It's impossible. So it's so much more powerful. But when I think I'm going to do something useful, I really cannot convince myself that praying is going to work, because I think of praying as I'm asking someone else to do, but I don't see myself as a channel sending out energy enough as I should, like that you can.
Really, yes, and I see that the practice, the more we, with anything, the more we practice, the more we feel, then it becomes a life experience, right? So then, I have this experience, so now I know the value. So it's how do we...
But has that changed in your life? If you had an accident, if there was you knew someone was... is your first port of call, do you go now to the 12 blessings or something like that, rather than first a materialistic assistance?
Depends on the circumstance, but often I find my immediate response is to call in energy. Often, is to call in assistance.
Oh, so you've reached that level, yeah.
And often that's my first response. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I want to get there.
And often my hands go out almost automatically. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Just as soon as there's a catastrophe, I'm like this.
Yeah. You see, I know that, but I haven't had the same experiences that you have. So my conscious mind has not been trained in that way. So
also, I'm finding, because I spend a lot of time in nature, I'm finding that when I'm out in nature and walking, it becomes very easy to bless the world there, because our minds can go all sorts of places when we have, say, 2 hours walking on a trail. And so I first started doing this on expeditions. I started realizing, okay, the mind can do I approach it very logically. The mind can do a few things. I can go into complaint. The weather's bad, my feet are cold, in which case my performance, and noticing what happens, my performance drops off, right? Literally, I'm draining my...
So you bring everything back into this performance aspect. You're focused on that.
That's right, yes. Yeah.
That's funny.
And then,
yeah. Very practical.
That's right, yes. Yeah. For me, even, I think it's so funny to say with Swamiji, the fact he had me moving so many deities, I think because I am practical, that landed with me. These deities, he could change the size of them, change the weight of them, all that sort of stuff. So literally, we had measurements. We measured doors. The deity won't fit through this door, right? we go back to him 3 times and say, look, it won't fit through. We have to knock the wall down. And he say, no, it will. We come to the day and it goes through, right? So things like that. So my very practical nature of things tends to boil things down to, okay, what is my direct experience of this?
I can only imagine if I've spoken to you at different times in this journey, you'd have been a lot more animated, I guess. You'd have been a lot more amazed than you are now. Now it's kind of, oh yeah, Ganesh changed size again.
Yes.
At the time, on the early steps of your journey, it must have been a mind-blowing.
Yeah, exactly. Because we did get complacent about it. But
oh yeah.
But I think though, you see, ultimately though, that's what he wants us to do, is to become, oh, this is normal, So because then, just as you say, then it's normal for my hands to do this, right? So it's now normal for me to bless people when there's an accident.
Yeah. It's like you say, there's these, or people say there's these veils over our the light bulb. We just have to peel them off. We have our psychic senses and our physical senses, and we've limited ourselves. We are disabled in a disabled state.
And it's, sorry, just on that note, just even for instance, on Everest, what I see there is that when I went there, I was feeling really fit and strong. One of my fellow guides was considered the best climber in the world at that time. And so we were racing up hills on the way in. We were feeling really good about ourselves, right? And we get to the base of the mountain, the Sherpas appear and, great, hey, how are you doing? Let's head up. So we each grab a load, and the Sherpas grab a load too. We say, how much are you carrying? Oh, well, we'll carry that. We start off and it's like, oh no, these guys are outpacing us. And so it was like on Everest, what I saw is that the Westerners come back with all these accolades about success, et cetera, but really it's almost like we're disabled in comparison to the Sherpas. We're nowhere near the functionality in those high elevations as the Sherpas, even really good climbers, So it's the same parallel, I guess, Yeah.
So have you spoke to Nithyananda about the Aetherius Society?
I don't think I have, no. Maria has mentioned it, but so it's because he's not so accessible. So have I spoken to him recently? No, I haven't spoken to him in a little while. He's referred to me. He's spoken about me to other people and things like that, and sent messages for, can you help with this? But I haven't communicated with him.
Because that would be interesting to know I know someone that was in Rishikesh, a teacher there told them that the 12 blessings was the most powerful practice currently available to humanity. So you don't expect, but at the top, they're probably all talking.
Yes. Yeah. We've tuned in, Maria and myself, and both get that, yes, the 12 blessings are really powerful, Yeah.
And what other aspects of the Aetherius Society? Because with this podcast, and I've made it my mission to serve. I'm trying to raise awareness of the Aetherius Society through this, by making this a successful podcast and with my music.
Oh, I see. It's
the way that I can
reach more people.
Because you can do, because I think wisdom is, because with spiritual healing, you can help someone for one life. You can get them through a problem, but they say that wisdom is the greatest thing you can give another man or woman, because it goes on to the next life and can help them, the karmic behavior for this life. So the wisdom that you've given now, I'm sure in this conversation, a lot of people would just be like, that was pretty crazy. But maybe some people are really going to get inspired and want to learn more. And then we all came to something because of a book or a podcast or a lecture, just a little thing.
I agree totally.
So with the wisdom that
it's about, we have to put it out there, don't we?
What about when the Aetherius Society, because when I came across it, it's pretty crazy shit that all the other planets are inhabited and we evolve into the sun, we evolve into the earth, we evolve into galaxies eventually. And people like Nithyananda, they're one turn of the wheel away from us. They're but someone on like Saturn is like 9,000 turns of the wheel. So, and how much more is the sun, and how much more? So was that pretty crazy for you as well?
I approach it from the perspective of, so all of this could be true, and so let me experience it. Let me be open to what is being said, and then let my body respond or be the witness to it. And I do see that I look at it from the perspective of possibility. So what is our possibility as humans? And so this is another realm of possibility, right? And so how do I live into that possibility on a day-to-day basis? What does that make me a more kind of considered human in the moment? And what I see ultimately there is that the actions that the Ethereal Society recommends definitely do make me a better human, basically.
You're such a practical man. You're nuts and bolts all the way. Even though you've had all these crazy experiences, you're still, I could tell you're really down to earth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Isn't it fascinating how we're all so different? Yeah.
Yes, because you see, what I see there, though, is that we can argue with anything, right? And we love to argue. So do I want to spend my time arguing, debating with the Ethereal Society about whether it's correct? But if you look at where the information comes from and the state the person was in when the information was delivered, then the experience of people around that person, then, oh, wow, this is information that was delivered at a time and place that is exceptional and extraordinary, right? And so therefore the information, it's worthwhile considering the information very openly because of that. It's having been around people who have almost been in trance spaces or know that what's possible, then that information then becomes much more, I guess, credible and curious. So then my curiosity is sparked by what's coming through.
Yeah. I often use a mountaineering analogy in spiritual when I'm talking about spirituality as well, is that we're climbing this mountain in a terrible fog or a storm, whichever way you like. Yeah. And the only people we can really communicate with are those 2 feet in front of us, higher up the mountain. There's no good. People 10 meters up are no good to us. They speak another language. They're too advanced for us. We can't see them. But it's only people who can come down a couple of feet. Help. Oh, I know that guy. He got up that. He's gone up there. I'll go up there. And gradually inching our way up this mountain.
Yeah, that's my mountain. No, I think it's walking in a fog. I think is such a great metaphor because we're all blind to various things that we don't know as well. We can see the fog, but there's a bunch of other blindnesses that we don't see, unfortunately.
Well, I keep talking to you all day, Martyn, but I've got to write a song.
Okay. So what are you thinking for the song?
Yeah. I don't know. It's it's conscious mind versus, because I've written for this, I'm almost up to 100 now. So, and every time I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. I don't. This time I'm not going to. I don't know how I do it because it's my
sweet.
Yeah. So I've got no idea, but it will come, so magically.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Beautiful. Actually.
Yeah.
I'm getting I know it's going to come because I'm getting shivers.
Oh God, it's going to be a good one then.
Yeah. I'm getting goosebumps.
All right. Well, if you receive it, email it to me.
Yeah. Okay.
Because sometimes I receive it not so good.
I'll ask Maria to join in. We'll be sending you good vibes.
Fantastic. I hope we can meet up one day. And are you in LA now?
Yes.
Do you go to the headquarters sometimes?
We were going until the pandemic. So
okay.
So I haven't been in.
See Brian and Paul.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I really enjoyed them too.
I've spoken to them both on the podcast before, and they've both been great guests.
I'm sure. Yeah. Also just the quality of the people makes a difference to me. So they're really very sweet, quality people. Yeah.
They are. They have just such profound energy. Yeah, it's really lovely, lovely people. Yeah.
Okay.
As you are.
Okay.
Thank you, Martyn.
No, it's very, very sweet to meet you. I'm much more used to asking questions. I'm really curious, so I'd almost prefer to turn tables and interview you.
No, I think everyone prefers listening to you.
Oh, okay.
You did a great job.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Bye, Martyn.
Yeah, goodbye. See you.
Open my heart and receive. I'm about to believe. Show me how, show me now. 'Cause I'm about to believe. Ready to know and perceive. Oh, I'm about to believe. Thanks, Martyn. You made a believer out of me. Thanks to my musicians, Mauricio Sanicola, Massimino Vodza, and Luigi Falcione, and my researcher, Dori Verbo. If you like the song, you can listen on all the usual streaming channels, or if you want to own it forever, don't get it as an NFT, get it as an MP3 from podsongs.com for just $1. I'd like to finish with an honorary mention to the Etheria Society, the teachings of which led me to start this project serving the surfers, helping those who help others. You can learn more about the society at etherius.org or listen to my new podcast, The Mystic Cast, which is available at podsongs.com or on this Podsong podcast app, which you're listening to now. Take care, have a great time. See you next week.